Pradeep Vincent. Welcome to our fourth video blog in our First Principles video series. Today we have with us Shakib Rahman, one of our engineering leads in Oracle. Shakib, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Pradeep, for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Shakib Rahman. I lead design and user experience for Oracle Apex, Oracle's low-code development platform. I also oversee the development of a number of special projects and services built using Apex.
Awesome. All right. So early 2020, the world saw an unprecedented COVID pandemic breakout with vast, devastating consequences across the globe, both in terms of health and well-being for everyone, as well as, the economic fallout of all the, pandemic. And frankly, like everyone was, including all of us, we were trying to figure out, what's going on and trying to make sense out of it all. Most of all, the medical field was just getting started to understand what was going on, understand the magnitude of it, understand the implications of this virus, and then figure out various therapeutic approaches to actually, helping the humankind, if you will, both in terms of vaccination as well as in terms of antiviral drugs. A key to maximizing success of that effort was data. Right? Massive amounts of data had to be processed, had to be brought in and processed and analyzed and made sense out of. At Oracle, we had the privilege of actually working with various government entities and key, medical entities, hospitals, and medical research facilities to actually develop a software service that'll help collect massive amounts of COVID-related data. And eventually it's also used for other types of infectious diseases, and essentially help us do the therapeutics better. And Shakib was one of the engineering leads who was, has been involved in that effort from the early stages. And we're going to talk about, his experience. Yeah. So Shakib, tell me a little bit about, how you got involved in this.
That's a great question, Pradeep. And I think you set it up really well. So as you mentioned, at the start of this pandemic in March, when the lockdown started, there was a lot of uncertainty, right? There were a lot of unknowns, and the world really didn't know what it was up against and how to best deal with this situation. So all we know is that the virus is spreading really quickly and that it's very dangerous. And like you mentioned, really the best weapon we have against uncertainty is data, and building systems that collect data, that manage data, that analyze data is our core expertise. So on the evening of March 18th, I got a text message at 9:30 p.m. From my colleague to jump on a Zoom call. And when I jumped on, my SVP was on, and he was explaining to us on the Zoom that Oracle is joining the fight against the pandemic, and that our first task is to build a system to be delivered in days that would understand the efficacy of these COVID-19 treatments that are being prescribed to patients in the United States. And we want to capture this important data and arm healthcare agencies and healthcare professionals with the data they need to, understand the efficacy of these different treatments and really help understand the virus and make informed decisions. And again, we needed to build the system really fast. So that's why we were on the call. So this is the early days of the pandemic again, and there's numerous treatments being prescribed, and really, how do we understand what works, what doesn't work? And that's what we're here to do.
All right. So Shakib, what were some of the key requirements for this, project or initiative that you got pulled into, and how quickly were we trying to deliver this?
So I'll talk about the key requirements first, and really, these are systems that are really new systems that haven't really been built before, right? So that's why we have to build something new to tackle this new problem. So the key three requirements that we have are, first, the systems have to be secure. And, all systems have to be secure, but these systems, we're dealing with personal health information that requires the highest levels of privacy and security requirements. These include strict government control, such as data residency. In the United States, that meant that our systems needed to be FedRAMP and FISMA high requirements to enforce the strictest levels of controls. Right? This is very critical data. The second key requirement that we had was that our systems had to be scale. So these systems are going to be servicing millions of users, and they need to make sure that they're up, there's no downtime, that they're going to be able to solicit, collect the data that we need in the time that we need it to be. Serving up millions and millions upon users, having them access the system, not having any downtime across the globe, that's critical. The next key requirement is really speed of delivery. right? There's no time to build a functional spec. There's really, this is a very interesting situation where we're dealing with an unknown, and we're trying to see what can we build and what can we do today? What can we deliver in days to help understand this pandemic and build solutions around it? So a key requirement was actually the speed of delivery, how fast we could move.
Got it. So essentially, security, particularly because of the nature of the data that we deal with, and the scale, and the third one being, how fast we are able to deliver the solution. How fast are we talking about? Are we talking about like months or years? Like how fast?
So traditionally in a software development lifecycle, right, we're talking for a fast system, generally people think of months, right? Maybe a year. Generally systems take a long time, right? There's an entire process that they need to go through. You need to go from the design stages, initial requirements gathering, to concept, proof of concepts, UX mockups, to development, to like QA, to production, and then there's production support. So it's a fairly lengthy cycle. And we need to just reduce this entire cycle into a matter of days. So the first system we launched actually went live in about 10 days, from nothing at all to having a system that's capable of supporting the entire United States population live for anyone to access.
So you're saying that we actually got, from start, we were able to launch something in like 10 days. That's right?
And it's not just something, it's a system that was able to handle at scale millions and millions of users, if that needed to be the case. So again, just going back to my initial point, building systems takes a lot of time. But what we are doing here is we're no strangers to building these large systems, and we have some of the best tools on the planet to be able to help us do these things. So it wasn't really a matter of, we didn't really look at, hey, what is the functional requirements? What do the designers say? We just thought, hey, we have all these tools at our disposal. What's the problem we're trying to solve? And how can we work with all these different government agencies we were working with to figure out what the solution is?
Got it. So clearly the timelines sound impossible from my perspective. So, what made you so confident? It looks like you had a bunch of tools or services that you actually used. Is a part of it? What else was there that made you so confident you can actually move so fast?
When we were looking at what to build, there were three key things that helped us develop what we did. The first thing is we had OCI, right? And so Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, it provided us all the foundational components, all the building blocks we need to build a cloud scale system, right? And I'm talking about load balancers here, like a email delivery service, streaming services, all the underlying architecture, including Exadata and Autonomous Database and Oracle Analytics Cloud. So all these different components, whether they're larger components that provide a platform to build applications on, or the underlying smaller details that you need to run these services. So it provided us with the cloud level infrastructure that we need. The next key component was the Oracle Exadata and Oracle Database, right? This is the world's best data platform. So if we're talking about collecting data and analyzing data, there's nothing better than the Oracle database in industry. And we have this at our disposal, and it works at scale in all these different regions because OCI provides us, government regions to deploy these on. So we've got OCI, we've got Exadata and database. And the final component that we used here was Oracle Apex. And that's really what my team is responsible for, developing the user experience for. Oracle Apex is a low code platform, meaning that you're not writing a lot of code, and instead you can focus on developing this solution. I can go into the architecture a little bit, but really what allowed us to build these solutions really fast was that we weren't building from scratch. We were relying upon this platform, this proven platform across the globe in every industry. We're relying upon the database platform, proven across industry for many, many, many years. And then we're relying upon OCI that give us the foundational components.
Got it. So essentially, we relied on OCI, the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and you leveraged a variety of services. Looks like OCI services, from load balancers to monitoring, all the way to database services, Exadata service, as well as the Apex that's associated with the Exadata service. And then on top of it, really leverage Apex, which is a low-code environment, to really accelerate this. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. So really, due to the urgent nature of this, again, right, we weren't thinking, how do we build a cloud scale application, or how do we build an application that can service millions of users? We were focused on the mission at hand, which is what we were working with on these stakeholders. We were working with stakeholders for. So our key objective was, let's meet with our stakeholders from all these different government health agencies, from NIH, from CDC, and let's determine what the solution is we want to build. Because we know that we have the cloud pieces taken care of. We know that we have the data platform pieces taken care of. So with Apex, right, we can accomplish in a 1-hour web conference what would normally take weeks or days or weeks to accomplish, because we're not worrying about all the minutia of application development, right? We're able to go online, build an application on screen, and make changes live in real time. And that's really the beauty of it, because now you're able to sit down with the customers, with our health partners, and build something live versus going back to the drawing board and going through this process again and again.
Got it. So essentially, you're able to focus on the business logic, if you will, and not worry about all the building blocks that need to go in to make us highly scalable, secure service, right? So what were some of the OCI services that actually you leveraged here? Sure.
So because we had to handle vast amounts of traffic, right? We use the load balance service to make sure that we're distributing the load properly. We use the OCI email delivery service because we were sending out email notifications. That was a critical part of these systems. We use the OCI streaming service to send out SMS notifications. We used all the monitoring capabilities, all the even the Oracle Analytics Cloud services. So depending on which stage of the pandemic we're looking at or which systems we're building, we really leverage the full swath of services that we had available. So that's really what gave us this ease, is that, hey, we didn't have to go elsewhere. We didn't have to go to a third-party service and integrate all these things, especially with the sensitive nature of this data. So everything was already there. It helped us build what we needed to do.
Got it. Awesome. So when people think about, low code environment, people generally think about it as hey, it's suitable for, small apps, that we can cobble something together. Are you saying that in this case, low code environment was actually critical in such a highly scalable service that we launched really fast?
Absolutely. And that is a very common myth about low code platforms. People think that low code is used for cookie cutter solutions, right? Small applications, departmental applications. This is an absolute myth. And we know this because Oracle Apex has been used across the globe. We know many customers are using it across the globe for very intensive, data intensive, mission critical systems. In fact, even at Oracle, we use Apex. Apex is used by every line of business. So when we're talking about Apex here, right, and low code development, what this lets you do is it eliminates the complexity of building solutions from scratch. So the alternative would be use your favorite JavaScript framework of the day. Maybe it's React.js, right? And then build every component and every REST service by yourself, and build all these microservices, integrate them together, and build all the security layers on top of that. That takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of expertise. With Apex instead, we're able to again focus on the problem solving, and it's a very unique architecture that Apex provides, where we're not focused on building these individual components. Apex it's not a code generator. It's a metadata interpreter. What that means is Apex stores the application runtime definition, the application itself, as rows in the Oracle database. So if you have a page, if you have an application, it's actually stored as a record in a table. And the unique nature of Apex is that it actually lives within the Oracle database. So you've got this application engine running in the Oracle database that is tuned to work, at crazy scale. And now you're running your application essentially within the database. So you have zero latency access to your data. So when Apex is looking at your page and rendering it on your page, it's accessing this information directly within the table, within the database itself, rendering it on the screen, interpreting that metadata, which is already so close to it. And it's interacting with data that is so close to it because it's in the database itself. You literally cannot build applications faster that interact with data than doing it inside the database where the data resides.
Got it. So essentially, the low code environment is it essentially takes some config, developers create, and then using the config, it actually has a code that's actually stored as part of the database, and it has extremely low latency access, essentially zero latency access to the database itself, which has all the other actual data that has to render, things like that. Is that
right?
correct?
And actually, I didn't get into this, but like the way that you would build an application using Apex is not like you're not writing a lot of code, right? It's a low code platform. So you're using your browser. Your browser is like really the only tool that you need. And we've got like, drag and drop wizards. We've got like configuration. Let's say you wanted to have a faceted search on your application, right? You're looking at all the data that's coming in and you want to analyze this. We have a component called faceted search. You simply point to the table or view that has your data. And now you've got this graphical user component on your screen, which is extremely user-friendly. It's been tested for accessibility. It works with your keyboard. It works in bidirectional languages. It can be easily translated. It can work for a global audience, right? And that comes out of the box. We don't have to do anything special to make this work. So that's really what led us to use Apex is we've got these powerful components out of the box. So we don't need to code again and again, right? These are components that come with Apex, higher level components. And what this means is we're able to sit down with our, with the CDC and say, hey, here's what we can build. Does this look right to you? Oh, no. Oh, you want us to change this? No problem. We don't need to go back to the drawing board, right? We can do this live right there with them.
Got it. So you essentially are like on a Zoom call, like video call with some of your customers, and you actually were able to change the widget or edit things, and then immediately showcase, hey, this is how it might look, and then iterate really fast. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Like the mantra of Apex development and low-code development is, you build something, you iterate, and when you're ready, it's already deployed, right? Like there's nothing fancy to do here. There's nothing to spin up. It's your application metadata that you've been modifying the entire time. There's no compilation, right? Simply take the application. And because Apex runs uniquely in the database, right? We can scale using Exadata. So the same application code, we're not rewriting the application to run on a different platform. Just take it from any database, stick it on Exadata, and now your application runs way faster and it can take advantage of all the features of Exadata. So one way of looking at Apex is it's a very thin veneer on top of the database platform.
So when you're actually developing, the service, was it like, in 10 days where, did you actually deliver everything, or like how did that evolve over time?
So we started with building a system that would understand the efficacy of these COVID-19 treatments. Within deploying the system, which we went live on April 1st or March 31st, I believe. Within a few days, we were already engaging with regional healthcare providers to build a system that would understand the spread of COVID-19 in regional hospital systems. Right, another similar system where they wanted to track a population to understand sort of what symptoms they're going through and see how does COVID spread in these regional populations. A few months later, we were already working and engaging with government agencies to build a system that would solicit volunteers for the COVID-19 clinical trials. Right. So at this point, like these are different stages of the vaccine of the pandemic. Right. First is, hey, there's therapeutics. Do any of these work? Which ones work well? Let's capture that data and understand it and make it available to healthcare. Let's understand how COVID spreads. Hey, the vaccines are being developed. How can we solicit volunteers for these vaccines? Now, these clinical trials we're talking about were some of the largest ever conducted. They had about 30,000 participants each. Generally, a clinical trial has about 2,000 participants. So because of the impact and global scale of this pandemic, we were able to build a system that would solicit volunteers and allow the companies to really narrow down the exact demographic they were looking for to make sure that we covered everyone in these trials. That was just one of the systems. So really, we developed systems at a cadence of once every few months. I think like a system going live every month and a half, from the COVID-19 clinical trials system to a system that would handle the end-to-end process of pre-registering for a vaccine, to registering for a vaccine, scheduling a vaccination appointment, to vaccination, safety survey, safety monitoring, which is what we eventually deployed in the United States with a program called VSafe.
Wow. Well, so I remember getting my COVID shot, and I got a little pamphlet that says, "Hey, go register this VSafe." So when I actually registered in VSafe and entered all my the post-vaccine effects and whatnot. Does that essentially, did that all go through the service that we had developed?
Absolutely, yep. So you went through an application that we developed here at Oracle. So you went through OCI, you went through the load balancers, you went through Oracle REST data services, you went to Apex, and the data got stored there. And then the CDC was able to actually use that data. And actually, like a lot of the data that we collected using this VSafe program was used to the vast majority of safety information that we know about the COVID-19 vaccines comes from this system. So the CDC used this system, which has over 10 million active users, about 135 million, I think, to date, active health check-ins in the system. So the CDC used this to really conclude a number of things about the vaccines. For example, that they were safe for pregnant women, right? Women don't often know that they're pregnant or not, and in the clinical trials, they're they're not really represented. So when we built the system, they were able to look at the data, and they even conducted a number of adjunct studies on the data that we had collected for them. So it's really quite interesting to see this, whole thing come together.
Well, that's excellent. So at the end of it, looks like, there's a variety of different types of services for different, aspects of, the management of the epidemic that came out of this. Where is this used? Is it in the United States, or is it also used in other countries and for other use cases?
It's used across the globe. And it's actually really quite interesting. The first system that I would call these systems the Oracle Health Management System. And all of these systems, all these different applications that I talked about, they're all really different modules, so to say. So we actually deployed this in Ghana and Senegal, across Africa, in many different countries. We also deployed this in Tasmania. So these different nations are using different parts of these systems. So in Tasmania, for example, the entire end-to-end system of the vaccine rollout and logistics are being handled using this Oracle Health Management System. In the United States, it's being used for safety monitoring, but also ordering vaccines from the federal partners and pharmacy partners, as well as understanding all the vaccine records and providing a clearinghouse for that. So these are global systems translated in many languages that really work across the globe to help with this pandemic.
That's really great. That's awesome to know about the role OCI and Oracle and the services that we develop were able to play in a small role, even in terms of helping control the pandemic overall.
Absolutely. One thing that I have to say is that the folks that we were working with on a daily basis, from the CDC or from NIH or from these various different government agencies or from different countries and their agencies, they're some of the most hardest working people. We are really in a privileged role here as tech workers where we're able to work from the comfort of our homes. This pandemic really impacts. I think there's not a single person that hasn't been impacted, and our team has personally been impacted by this pandemic. So I think it was really nice to play a role in this, and hopefully make this a little bit easier to go through. So I'm just really proud of the work that Oracle has been able to do, and I'm just happy that I was able to play a small role in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shakib, for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Pradeep.